Hey everybody, Bernie Gallerani. We have created a new podcast for all of the people out there that are watching our YouTube channel. And we've been working on this actually for about a year or so, year and a half. And what's the direction? What is it we're trying to really accomplish with this podcast? And also, what kind of people do we want to have on it? What is our attraction? Why does anybody really want to pay any attention to something like this? And so for those that know me really well, they know that I'm a big time reader. I watch a lot of podcasts daily. I'm about being inspired by others. Being inspired is a key to growth. I feel that. And so we have created a podcast that we came up with, and it's a fun name and I like it. And it's something that I came up with years ago in a interview that I was doing. And so it just kind of fell out of my mouth. And ever since then, I've been using it and I find it very fitting. And it's success is not convenient. And what we love about that title of our podcast is it gives us a large variety of things that we can do with that name and the direction of the podcast in which we feel most empowered to deliver. So let me explain to you why we've done it, why we named it that way, and kind of what we can expect for the future of the Success is Not Convenient podcast. One of the things that I've learned in the life that I've had and then meeting very successful people is there's always a story. And the story is what makes their personality and their success somewhat interesting, right? As you find, you ever been in a situation where you're telling a story about somebody and yet you're like, well, let me tell you how it started off with them. And boy, they were sleeping in their car, or they grew up in a really poverty area, or they had a really difficult family life, and yet they've overcome all of that. And they've made this massive success because of the story that I have personally. It was really fitting for me, and I felt very passionate about the name because of my personal story. However, what I've learned in interviewing so many people and talking with them and coaching them over the years is that a lot of people who are successful have a similar story. And I'm very intrigued by the obstacles people go through, the challenges that people have in order to have success. You know, I think that for many of us, we can use things in different ways. In that if you grew up in a really difficult, challenging life, we can use that as a reason not to have, right? Like, you didn't understand about my life. I had a very tumultuous life. I didn't really have money. I had a parent that was abusive, or I had a parent that was an alcoholic or a drug addict, or we were homeless. We were living on, family members' couches or in the back of our car, right? And when you hear these stories and then you see that they've had a success, it's interesting. But yet we have the same kind of conversations with people that don't use that for bettering their life. They use that for continually being the reason why they're not successful. That's the most interesting part, I think, about this podcast. It's, we could interview people that have written books, and we can interview successful people in business, and all that is very interesting. But I also find that their stories are equally as intriguing of how they put their mind in a place where others will use that as a victim mentality. There are many people actually that use that as fuel to achieve really, really great things. And I get inspired by that. And I have many stories of people that I've met over the years who tell me stories about their life. I have a really good friend of mine who grew up in a trailer, who then became a multimillionaire. I have friends who have very sad childhood lives and grew up becoming multimillionaires. I love those stories. And the questions that I ask them are things like, what of your childhood that was negative you turned into a positive that made an impact in the growth of your business? See, these are the questions that I like asking is, how do you stem from that? How do you develop success with that experience going on inside your head? And some of the answers are fascinating to me, how somebody could take this and move forward. But yet other people, who we probably won't have on this podcast, other people would say just the opposite of it not being empowering, but it's the reason why their life never went anywhere. Is you don't understand because I couldn't do this. It paralyzed me. moving forward? Are you paralyzed by your back life, by the life you had, the one that happened yesterday, last year, 10 years ago, 20 years ago? Are you still stuck in that? I was having a conversation with somebody about 2 years ago. They had gone through a really difficult divorce. And in that conversation, they were continuing to bring up things regularly about their ex-spouse. But yet they had been divorced from this ex-spouse for 13 years. And almost in every conversation about relationships and feelings, this bad relationship kept coming up. So I said to this individual, I said, it's really interesting. You actually divorced your spouse 13 years ago, but right now, every day, you still live in that really difficult relationship. And so the question I asked her was, how's that prevented you from moving forward? Living and dwelling in all of those memories of this bad relationship that has paralyzed this individual because they haven't moved forward from dealing with it, right? Now, of course, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I can tell you this. I think a lot of people have stories like that, and some use them for good and better their life, and others, it paralyzes them. And so our Success is Not Convenient podcast is really about successful people who have overcome challenges. I'm a believer, and I've said this for years, success is not convenient, which means it never lines up with what you want. Success has a kind of a different set of rules, right? There's and sometimes it's hard to even figure out the rule, right? You're like trying to figure out, well, how do successful people become successful? In some ways, it's a little bit of a secret code, but in other ways, it's not. It's pretty out there for all of us to see. The real question is, are we trying to find success in our schedule, our story, our downfall, or are we pushing all that aside and then changing our behavior pattern and going to meet success where success meets the successful? See, success is hanging out in a certain area. And in that area, there's quite a few people who are in that successful area. But success never comes to you. Success doesn't sleep in. Success doesn't stay up late. It doesn't stay up late and then sleep in. Success is everywhere all the time. You just have to meet it. And if you're sleeping in, or you're going to bed late, or you're not being proactive or productive in your life, and you're not chasing something that is going to ultimately fulfill your level of success, and you're stuck in who you were, it's not going to find you, and you're never going to find it. And so what I love about the name Success is Not Convenient is it won't show up in your daily pattern. You have to actually change your daily pattern for it to show itself. And my goal with this podcast is to pull out the difficult things that these authors, these owners, these business people, these successful people, is to pull out from them, what did you learn from your environment? What did you learn from your life? How did you overcome all of those obstacles? What was it about your business that was your biggest challenge? How did you overcome that challenge? What is your viewpoint today on all the struggles you used to have? Why did you find success where so many others are not finding it? It's always fun, right, to look at how people, I have a story of somebody who I know is really successful. They really weren't all that successful in high school, right? Barely graduated, actually, high school, but yet turned their life into a positive and own several businesses and very, very wealthy person. Like, man, tell me about that. Like, what was going on inside of your brain that allowed what happened in high school to then transform you into a different thinking person, to then work really hard, to then all of a sudden changing your mindset to now where you have this amazing, abundant life. What I love best about stories like that is it tells you that everybody has a story. You've heard that. Everybody has a side to their life that probably wasn't so attractive. Everybody has things like that. People have family members that didn't treat them really great. People have siblings that didn't treat them really great. People have friends that didn't treat them really great. And yet they still found a way to find success. And so I want to bring this podcast to everybody who has an interest at saying, that sounds like my life, but yet that person did something to cause an abundant life. And I'm choosing to live in a life where it's paralyzing me based on what I did. Now, I know there's going to be people that are going to go, well, you don't understand what they went through. Listen, I'm going to let everyone else deal with what they went through. I'm not seeking those that went through it. I'm seeking those that conquered the other side of that. If you have a story that you haven't conquered it, I want to find those that have conquered it. That's what this podcast is about. So I'm going to bring you one of these stories each and every week of people that'll sit down with me and tell me their story. And let's dissect what it was that got them from where they were, homeless. There might have been drug addicts. They might have been in jail, and they've figured out a way. They might have been abused. They might have been down on their luck. They might have been sleeping on the street. They could have been sleeping in a car. They could be broke and destitute. Many people have that. But there's a few people who say, I'm not going to tolerate that anymore, and I'm going to do something powerful with my life. Why it's passionate for me is because that was my story, and that I had a story like that. I grew up in HUD housing, Section 8 basically, right? Subsidized government living. My mom was married 5 times. Can you imagine the relationship issues of having a mother who was married 5 times, right? I want to work towards improving, and I want to find those people that I can talk with that can inspire you to continue to keep pushing forward, because there are no limits in your level of success. The only limit you choose to accept is the one that holds you back from your past. I hope everybody finds value in what we're trying to accomplish here. And remember, success is never convenient, but it is available for everybody if you choose to accept it. Hope you guys enjoy.